Hello everyone, welcome to video 1.2. We're now at part 7 of 10 of the tax company PC procurement, which is really a lot more than just a PC procurement, but that's just what it started out as. So if we look at the script, at this point I'm supposed to put together the statement of work, the high-level design, and the project plan, and then I'm going to send that over to Ted as my manager to basically let him know that things are going well, but I want my manager to look over all of the deliverables that I'm going to complete, and then I'm going to send them over to Bill for final approval. So it's a really big deal. The statement of work is more or less the thing that guarantees that you get paid, because at that point the customer is really committing to actually uh, vouch for the work that's going to be done, and they've agreed upon the work that's going to be done, and they're more or less agreeing to pay for the work that's going to be done. The high level design just kind of shows the customer more details as to what's going to be done, and the project plan is more about timeline as far as when it's going to be done. There was a bill of materials that I was initially going to have in there, but we basically had the bill of materials, which is a list of items, in our proposal, so it's kind of overkill, so I got rid of that. So right now we're just going to go with the basics of a statement of work, which again is kind of the final sign-off. We've got the high-level design, which is more or less the technologies that are going to be implemented, more details, and then the project plan is all about the timelines of what's going to be done and when. So in order to do that, we're going to take a look at some of our templates that we have. So if we go over to our trainees, TED trainee, again, it's going to be whatever your name was. If you go under projects, open, bills, tax haven, again, we're going to open because it's an open project still. So we used this service quote already template to put together the quote. So now we got to put together the high level design, the statement of work, and the project plan. So I'm going to go ahead and just look at the high-level design first. So this is a template that the manager sent over to us, right? So a template's going to have this kind of thing where you basically have placeholders. So for like the project name, the version, the date, the document number, even the header and footer, all it says is Artisan Consulting, right? Because that's the thing that's always going to be the same. Our company is always going to be the same, but the customer is always going to change. So it says customer XX and also version X. So we need to, excuse me, update the header and footer on this document. You've got a table of contents, which is pretty much in any professional document you could have a table of contents, so that someone can just, so if you highlight something, it says like control and click. So if I can hit control and click, it'll take you to that part of the document. Now this navigator, that's something I like. If you go to view and if you unclick it, it'll go away. If you click navigation pane, it's kind of like a table of contents in that you can just click on any section and immediately go to it. So it's kind of a nice feature. So if we start at the very top and scroll down, so in a lot of the templates you'll see this type of thing where there's kind of like a instruction written in a different color. So this is just kind of notes for someone in case they didn't know what to write in here. So you'll write whatever you want to write using this as a guideline, and then you'll usually get rid of this part because it's more of a template thing. It's just more notes. So you've got your goals for the project, you've got your purpose, you've got objectives, you've got the proposed system, you got the business processes, you've got the functional requirements, then you have the new system that's going to be implemented, you have the operational requirements, excuse me, and then also the user community, meaning like who's actually using this. Then you have the technology architecture, we'll have a diagram, we'll have the platforms and software, and then connectivity requirements. So this is actually, even though it is overkill to put together a really formal, high-level design document for a project this small, I just wanted to just kind of show you that these documents exist because for larger projects you would do these. But again, as a help desk person, you probably wouldn't end up doing design documents. But if some of y'all end up going into more of a network operations role or something else, you very well could end up doing this. So this is kind of killing two birds with one stone in that it's showing you a bunch of professional documentation, getting you used to writing technical documents, improving your proficiency with a bunch of Word and Excel type Office products. Also, Visio is something we're going to be using to make diagrams. So a lot of this has to do with just kind of rounding you off and giving you a bunch of extra experience with a whole lot of things that will help you later on. So if you look at this, you might not really think of the diagram as like the most important part, but I actually like to start there because if you draw the diagram, it'll kind of get your brain working in what all is in this solution. So even though it's just one little part, sometimes it's actually the most important part because customers and just people in general are oftentimes visual people, so they'll kind of skip a lot of the wording and go to the diagram because it's just easier to understand. And it's also easier for you to draw the diagram and then kind of do the write-up based on the diagram. So that's not always intuitive. So to get started, we're going to just open up Visio. So if you just type VI, Visio will pop up. And we're just going to pick, there's all kinds of templates that you can pick that are like predefined, like like a rack diagram if you want to put all the things in a rack. Active Directory, which we'll do later. There's all kinds of things in here. You can even search for templates if you wanted to. But we're just going to do just a basic diagram. And we're going to hit Create. This is a very, very simple project, so we don't need to go too crazy with it. So I like to make it a bigger size to start off with. Some people like to actually collapse the ribbon to gain more space. If you ever want to bring it back, you can hit Home or whatever, and then you see this little thing that is flipped over horizontally. If you click it again, it'll now stay up, so it won't auto hide like it was doing before. If you hit this, it'll auto hide to gain more space, but if you want it back, click here, and there you go. So the things we had in place for bills, if we wanted to, we could even go back to our little picture that we did. For some reason my computer is freezing up a little bit. If you look at that cost visual, so these are basically all the things that I'd like to show in that diagram. So you've got your desktop, you've got your laptops, you've got your UPS, you've got these different software, you've got the internet, which is Comcast, you've got Office 365, you've got Ring Central, which is your phone system. You've got the website, which is hosted from Wix. You've got GoDaddy as the domain. And then this is the domain, of course, which is billstaxhaven.com. And that's another reason why I like to put this together, even though we sent a document to Bill, which was the proposal that had all this stuff written up. It's just kind of easy to look at in a nice, simple format like this. So this was for Bill's benefit, but also for mine. So I'm going to just show you some really simple things you can do in Visio. So I'm going to search for, what are all the things we had, right? So we had a PC, so search for PC. So I'm going to put the PC icon out there. We had laptops, search for laptop, put that out there. We had your Comcast cable modem, so I'm going to search for modem. Put that out there. We had the printer, so I'm going to search for printer. And I'm going to take this one, because that looks kind of like that HP LaserJet 4100 printer that Bill already had. Let's see, what else do we have? So we had the modem from Comcast. We had the desktop. And actually we have 3 of these laptops. So I'm just going to do all 3. So if you... sorry, I should probably start over. So if you just highlight this, you can hit Control-C and Control-V. And then you can hit Control-V again. So you've got 3 laptops. Also, there's wireless. Because remember, we wanted to... not have him use the shared Wi-Fi because that could cause a lot of problems. So I'm going to grab this wireless access point. I'm also going to grab this Wi-Fi signal just to kind of show that the laptops are going to be connected through Wi-Fi. I'm trying to think what else. So of course we do have the internet. Can't remember if they have an icon for internet. So we have the cloud we can use for that. Oh yeah, we should probably have some kind of lightning bolt that describes the internet connection, which might be under telecom. Or a circuit. Oh, here we go. Comlink. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so we've got the modem, we've got the wireless, we've got the desktop, Wi-Fi signal, printer, 3 laptops, Comcast internet. What else did we miss? Got that, you got that. Oh, the UPS. So some things you could just literally put out a box and do it. It doesn't have to be super fancy, so I can just write UPS in here. That's fine. And that's going to be under the PC. That. Printer. Phone system. Okay, so I'm just going to grab an icon of a phone system. So I'm just going to use that to symbolize the VoIP phone company. And I'm going to search for an email icon. Let's see, how about that one? So that's going to symbolize the fact that our email is controlled through the cloud. So this is going to show that we have our Ring Central as our VoIP service. We have Office 365, which is in the cloud for email and storage. So I'm going to maybe search for storage. Yeah, sometimes if it says not responding, that's not always the end of the world. Sometimes the computer just gets busy for a second. So I'm going to just pick that for hard drive. And when it's really small like that, you can actually just expand it like this. So that's going to be my storage in the cloud under Office 365. So that's going to be the OneDrive part. And I think that'll do it. Got the phone system, fax, email, Office. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, so now we can just put this together. So first thing I like to do is if you want to just create some space, hit Control A, which will do a select all, and then just hit the down arrow just to move things down a little bit. And I'm going to just put the cloud at the top here just to kind of work down from there. So the first thing that's going to connect to the cloud is going to be our circuit, which is going to be from Comcast. So I'm just going to go like that. Click this, move it down here. Okay, so I'm just going to go like this for the Wi-Fi because I'm just representing that we're going to use the built-in Wi-Fi from the Comcast modem. And I'm also going to use the text icon and write Comcast modem. And then go back to the pointer tool. So I'm going to put that down here. I'm going to change that to Internet Comcast. You want to make things as obvious as possible when someone's looking at a diagram. You don't want them to wonder, oh, I wonder who their internet provider is. Just write it in there. And then we'll draw. So also you can see like Visio, it automatically snaps things together so they're aligned, which is nice. So I'm just going to put the UPS over here. So I'm going to just align the desktop and the PCs all in a row, like so. So notice how it's doing that alignment thing, so you can just kind of do that. And I'm going to put one of these Wi-Fi icons next to each of the laptops just so it's obvious that they were all using Wi-Fi. And you can then copy Control-C and Control-V, Control-C and Control-V again. Okay, so now we've got the three laptops, the desktop, you've got the printer over here. Also with Visio, if you just click on any icon, you can go here and make it smaller or bigger, depending on whatever you want. If you want to undo something, you can always click here, undo, so if you want to go back. So I'm going to just make this a tiny bit smaller, and I'm going to also flip it. If you click here, and you can flip it over like that, just to kind of symbolize that this is part of the modem, so that no one thinks that there was actually a separate access point. And just to be really thorough, I'm going to just put in built-in Wi-Fi, just so that someone knows that it's the built-in Wi-Fi in the Comcast modem. Okay, so at that point, actually I'm going to move this around a little bit. There we go. Just because I didn't want to have you don't want to have any lines crossing, so I don't want to have a line go from here to the printer. You don't want to cross any item. Like for example, when you go here, you can pick a line. So if I had a line that was kind of going through this to something else, it kind of looks ugly. So you want to just not have any lines crossing. So now I'm going to show that the printer is actually connected directly to the modem. The desktop is also connected to the modem, because the modem actually has a switch on the back of it, and any of you guys that have Comcast or CenturyLink, the modem that they give you usually has at least a excuse me, a 4-port switch built into it, so you can connect up to 4 hardwired Ethernet devices right into it. So for Bill, we didn't want to necessarily have him buy an extra switch, which normally I would do that for any kind of business, to have a separate higher performance switch than the kind of crappy one that you get from Comcast. But for a company this small of just 4 people, he's only using 2 of the connections. The rest is Wi-Fi, because there's really no reason for the laptops to need to be wired in, because that also saves Bill a bunch of money, because if we had to wire his office by having a cabling contractor come out there and wire Ethernet to the 4 drops where these devices are going to be, or 5 in this case, then that's going to be expensive. So we're just going to probably do what's called a home run, where we'll just run a cable ourselves from the cable modem to wherever the printer is going to be, and we'll try to put the printer probably close to where the modem is, and the desktop, we'll probably end up putting that probably close to the modem too. And actually, now that I recall, we had a 4th laptop, because Bill's also going to use a laptop. So I'm just going to click this and this. If you hit Control, so if you left click one thing, it only highlights that. But if you hit Control and then you left click another thing, it highlights both. So now I can right click and copy. Then I can paste. Control V. So now I've got my 4 laptops. And at this point up here, we can stretch this cloud out a little bit to show that up here we have all these different services, right? So we've got our VoIP service for calls. We've got our Office 365. We've got OneDrive up here also. So I'm just going to label some of these now. So I'm just going to copy this. So once you put something out there, you can always copy it too. So like, let's say you had 2 printers. You don't have to like search printer in here and drag it out. You can actually just click the one printer, hit Control C, Control V, and put a second one out there. Now, we actually don't have 2 printers, so I just wanted to show you that as an example. So I'm going to copy this text box and go like that. So this is going to be Ring Central for VoIP. And you can always click on this and expand and make it further expanded so that the text actually looks better. If you want, you can also play around with the font. So if I want to make this, a 14-point font, it'll be bigger. If I want to make it a 10-point font, it'll be smaller. Things like that. So I'm just going to go like that, put it in here. And then I'm going to have this to label Office 365 Exchange. Oops. Email. Again, I just like to clean it up because it just looks unprofessional if it was kind of scrolled over like this. Like if you have like the E and then the mail, it just looks kind of silly. So I like to have whole words on a line. And then I'm going to put OneDrive underneath here so people can just visually see that everything's in the cloud, and that's where we're having our storage, right? So you can kind of see from the icon. Let's see, what else do we have? QuickBooks, ADP, and Lacert. So I'm going to put that on. I mean, this is probably overkill, but I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to put ADP as so I'm going to search for application. If they have it. There we go, application server. So that will be ADP payroll. And you don't have to do this, like list out every single app. In fact, for a larger company, they're going to have hundreds of applications that you use. But for a really small project like this, it's nice for someone like Bill who's not very technical to just see everything in one visual place. So this is really just for smaller customers. ADP, and then we're going to just copy the same thing for Lasso. So you can use the arrows also, like the up, down, left, right arrows to size things and move them around. Lasso tax software. Okay, so I think that's everything. Lasso, ADP, OneDrive, Office 365 for email, OneDrive for storage. I'm just going to write storage just in case someone doesn't know that. Ring Central for VoIP/fax. I'm just going to put that out there so it's obvious that it's also for fax. I think I'm going to also search for some kind of VoIP icon to show that the laptops are going to run instead of a physical phone, they're going to run a VoIP software on there called it's usually called a soft phone. So when you think of Skype, right? It's technically a soft phone. It's a soft video phone because it's not a physical phone. You just happen to have a piece of software called Skype installed that lets you make calls or video, right? So that was VoIP. So Ring Central has the same kind of thing where you can install some excuse me, software in each of your laptops or desktops to make calls, and it's just a way to have save some money so you don't have to buy physical phones. There are advantages to physical phones, but for a small company, it's just less work and it's cheaper to just use soft phones. Because if we did get hard phones, we'd have to also connect them into a switch of some kind because the professional hard phones generally don't do wireless as well. So you would have had to connect them into the switch. And at that point, this Comcast modem wouldn't have worked because it wouldn't have had enough ports. And then we'd have to get another switch, which would have added more cost. So then you would have had the cost for the phones themselves and the extra switch. So when you design a solution, I mean, there are definite costs that can add up. So you have to put into context the fact that this is just poor old Bill who's not really trying to break the bank and get a bunch of cutting edge stuff. He just wants a really simple solution and just wants it to work, right, for his 3 employees and himself. So now I want to move this. So instead of moving one at a time, you can do what's called a lasso by just highlighting all of them. And then you can use the right mouse key to just move them. Okay, so at this point, I think I've got everything. Let's check one more time. Oh, I forgot to write the domain. I'm going to put that over here. Actually, I'm going to see if there's a web server type of thing here. Web. There we go. I just put it over here because it was getting crowded over on this side. So I'm going to copy this text box, move that over here. I'm going to say bills, tax, haven.com. And I'm going to say that's through Wix and GoDaddy. So GoDaddy is the domain registrar. That's why we registered the domain, but Wix is where it's hosted, and that's where the site was made. Again, look how it scrolled over, so I'm just going to move this over to the right a little bit, and there we go. I think that's everything. I keep on saying that, and then I add something, but I think it is now. Got that, got that, got that, got the phone system, email, Office 365, the printer, internet, Comcast, QuickBooks, ADP, Lacert, the UPS, the desktops, and the laptops. I think that's it. Can't think of anything else. Oh, besides just writing what's on this desktop, so I'm just going to write QuickBooks Pro. Again, we got to move this over so that it's not scrolled over. So, okay. So it's pretty obvious at this point what is going on in this diagram. You can tell you've got 4 laptops. You've got some kind of VoIP phone, which is clearly indicated that it's software that's on the laptop. I'm getting kind of OCD with this because I hate it when it's not lined up. There we go. So that's pretty obvious that they're connected to Wi-Fi. You see that it's built-in Wi-Fi. You've got the Comcast modem. You're showing all the different applications that you have. So I think we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and save this. Save as. And I'm going to browse to my... If you go to this PC, you can browse to your T drive. And then I'm going to scroll down to trainees, TED trainee, which is me again, but you're going to pick whatever you are. Excuse me, projects, open, bills, tax haven. And I'm going to call this network diagram underscore version 1.0. Because remember, we like to do version numbers so it's easy to keep track of stuff. It should be good. I always like to double check things to make sure there aren't any spelling errors or things like that. Okay. Bills, Tax Haven, Wix, GoDaddy, Internet, Comcast, Ring Central, Office 365, OneDrive, ADP, Lacert, printer, QuickBooks Pro, laptops, Wi-Fi, VoIP phone. Yep, I think we're good. Okay, so now that we did that, we can go back to our high-level design. So first thing we're going to do is put in the project name, which is going to be Bills, Tax Haven, Build Out. And this is going to be version 1.0. And the date is going to be 3/14/2018. Document number, I'm going to just say is version 1.0. Also, something to keep in mind is you don't actually ever type in something into the table of contents. This is actually dynamic, so if you were to, for example, were to change this to introductions and you accidentally typoed that, it doesn't automatically change it, but if you come up here and you right click and you do update field and you say entire table, notice how the Z just kind of popped in there. So the whole theory there is if you pick a certain section like this and you set it, so if you go to home and you can basically set it as these different types. So if you make it a header type, then it will, so you can see how this is like a heading 2 type. So it's heading 1 and heading 2, and those are the things. So when it's a heading type, it's what makes it show up in the actual table of contents. So just something to keep in mind. Okay, so we've got all these different sections. I want to find the network diagram. There we go. I'm just going to call this network diagram. So again, now that we updated a section, we can paste, the diagram in here, right? So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to hit Control A, which highlights everything. It's a select all, and then I hit Control C, which will copy, and then we go in here. Now, I'm not going to just paste it, because if you just paste by default, it's going to try and embed the Visio diagram in the Word diagram, which is, I'll show you anyway. I'll show you what it's like. So if I just hit paste, it's going to add it in here. But it's going to add it as a Visio object, so I can actually double click in here and it will actually like dynamically open up Visio, which is kind of nice because then I can like change this without having access to the original Visio. But what is not nice about it is that it's going to make the file size way bigger. And also, you don't always want everyone to have access to the original drawing, because then you lose control over what's going out there, so that someone might edit this and send it off to someone else, and now this particular document might have your name on it and someone else is making edits. So for those reasons, I usually will just not do it that way. I'll hit paste and do paste special, and I'll embed it as a picture instead of a Microsoft Visio object. And so it looks the same, but now if you double click on it, you can't actually edit anything. It's just a picture, which is what I like, and it's also going to be much smaller. The size of the Word document is actually going to be nicer and smaller because of that too. So I've got this. So now I'm going to start to fill out some of these sections. I am going to do this rather quickly, and I'm not going to write a really long answer for some of these sections like I would in a more enterprise level project, because this is a small project for Bill, so we don't need to give him too much information. Okay, so let's just follow the directions, right? So technology architecture, describe the anticipated infrastructure that will be required to support the applications, focus on describing on a high level, right? So we will say, we have decided to leverage cloud computing to lower the technology burden of on-premises equipment and support. So that's a common thing you'll hear, is like on-premises is basically the things that you actually have in your office. So if you look, actually, like this is the LAN right here, and this is over the WAN, right? So this is over the internet. So most of the really complicated stuff is happening up here. So like you don't have any mail servers in your LAN, you don't have any phone system in your LAN, you don't have a web server in your LAN, you don't have storage, you don't have like the tax software. So The only real thing you have is this QuickBooks Pro, which again was only because that was a feature that he didn't want to use the QuickBooks Pro, or sorry, QuickBooks Online, which is in the cloud. He wanted to have QuickBooks Pro, which has more features, so therefore he had to have it locally on this desktop. But aside from that, everything is up here. So that really kind of made it simpler for Bill's support. In the old days, before they had all these different cloud solutions, you had to actually have like an email server and a web server that was actually managed by your own IT person. So even a smaller company had to have maybe not a dedicated IT person, but someone had to figure it out. And it was actually, it was really tough for some customers back in the day because they'd have to spend money on, hiring a company like Artisan Consulting to set up all this stuff. But now we can set all of this up for a much smaller price because we're just leveraging things that already exist in the cloud. So it's cheaper for everyone because of that. So that's why we're saying this. We've decided to leverage cloud computing to lower the technology burden of on-premises equipment and support. I'm going to say the primary business drivers were, and here we're going to use bullets. Office 365, Suite, I'm going to say Exchange, email. I'm going to just put Office 365 there also, so it's kind of associated with the same thing because that's all through Microsoft. It's all part of their suite. I'm going to say OneDrive, storage, ADP payroll software, the CERT tax software, I think that's it. Hosting of Bill's taxhaven.com website and email, which is all fairly obvious with the diagram. So I think that was fairly obvious. And then I'm going to say the only on-premises application is QuickBooks Pro, which is why a dedicated desktop is used along with a dedicated UPS which, by the way, you shouldn't be using acronyms. So if we didn't spell out uninterrupted power supply, that actually isn't good technical writing. You should always spell out. An acronym is just like, using the 3-letter thing by saying UPS instead of actually writing UPS, instead of actually spelling it out, and then in parentheses putting the acronym in there. And the theory there is so that if someone reads this, they don't have to have pre-existing knowledge. Anyone can read this, right? So I think that's pretty good for the technology architecture. I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that because that was the boilerplate part. And So platforms and software target. So I'm gonna say. So I mean that's we already there. See, like in a bigger design, you would have had the need for all these different sections would have added more value, but in this because it's such a small design, I mean a lot of this stuff is redundant. So software, I'm gonna say please see. You know what? Actually, I'm just going to get rid of this because if it's not adding value, I don't want to add it in here. It's kind of redundant. Oh, you know what? One thing we forgot was Ring Central VoIP phone and fax. Whoops. Let's say soft phone use for users. Okay. Let's see here. Connectivity requirements. We will utilize Comcast business internet at 75 megabits per second. This will be the underlying infrastructure to support all of the various cloud services outlined in 3.1.2. So instead of just restating everything, I'm just saying to support all the things that we have here. Okay, so we can get rid of that. Okay. Wait, let's just see if there's anything further down. So this record of change, this is if you had a document that was kind of what they call a living, breathing document, meaning that it's changed multiple times. So let's say that you had a bigger design and you put together a bunch of different equipment and software that they needed, but then the customer changes their mind and you add a bunch of extra stuff or you have to change. You might start out with version 1.0 that like we have, and that might be on today's date, so 3/14/18. You'll just put the company name here. So let's say that you put something like initial build out. But if for some reason, Bill was to all of a sudden hire 4 more people that he didn't think about, or he wanted to, support, let's say, a whole bunch more applications, and we thought that the bandwidth wasn't enough, then that would have been updated in like version 1.1 on, let's say, that was 3 months later. It would have been like 6/14/18 or whatever. And we would have put a description there, and that would have been a new version of the document where we would update it some more. But for this part, it's not relevant, so I'm just going to highlight this part. I'm going to hit delete to clear that text, and I'm going to highlight it again. I'm going to hit backspace, and then I'm going to hit OK. And this kind of cleans it up, right? So we don't need to have this in here because this is just boilerplate just to give you a description of what's supposed to happen. So it's a pretty simple record of changes. It's just because it's the initial build out and that's the only version we have so far. And then this would be the all-important sign-off. So I'm going to put name. So Bill Hicks. So his title is the president of Bill's Tax Haven. And then you're going to have Ted Trainee, whose title is manager of, which, by the way, when I'm highlighting this, I'm just hitting shift and using the arrows. You could also use your mouse and go like this too. It's just, sometimes it's difficult when you're trying to highlight a small part with your mouse like that, when it just goes crazy and like highlights more, or like highlights the whole cell like that. So it depends what you're comfortable with. Some people like using the mouse, which works fine. I like to just go to the beginning, hold down shift, and just use the right and left keys, because you can go one character at a time. But whatever works for you. So Ted is at Artisan Consulting. And then you have trainee 01, who is the technician, also at Artisan Consulting. And then that's it, right? We don't have any other party, so I'm going to get rid of this one. So if you highlight that and hit backspace and hit OK, gets rid of that. So now I can, when I print this out, then we can all three sign it. And let's see, the understand, acknowledge that they have reviewed the high-level design. Okay, so this is just kind of a standard thing that says, like, we understand what we're signing and that any other things would have to be re-signed. So I'm just going to get rid of these notes right here. And so these are called appendix, or just like parts that are added to the end. So it has nothing to do with the actual write-up of the document. It's more like, you know, supplementary things like the approval or the record of changes. So it's just separated from the main document. So okay, so we've got this section called new system. It's got the operational requirements and technical design. Okay, so the operational requirements are Bill Hicks was expanding his business and hired 3 new employees because the business moved from his home to a commercial address. Several technology improvements or changes had to be made. Let's say there were no existing pieces of hardware or software that could be leveraged, so we had to procure new laptops, desktops, software, and all required elements. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of this boilerplate part here. High level requirements, the design, I'll say, the need to support 4 users in a new office was what dictated the need for dedicated business internet and Wi-Fi. The speed of the Wi-Fi and internet was dictated by the cloud-based applications that were identified during discovery meetings of the software utilized in the solution. Identified in section 3.1.2. The QuickBooks Pro software was only supported on a local desktop because the cloud version of QuickBooks Online did not provide some of the advanced multi-customer use cases required by Bill's Tax Haven. So the use case is a common thing you'll hear. So that's just basically like features or things that they needed from the software. So we're basically saying that QuickBooks Pro was supported on a local desktop because the cloud version of QuickBooks Online did not provide some of the advanced multi-customer use cases required by Bill. So we're just basically explaining why we did this and why we had to get dedicated business internet and why we had to actually move to an office, cloud-based applications, all that stuff. The user community, this is basically saying, who's actually using this. Bill's Tax haven is comprised of the owner, GoHex, and 3 additional users. All users are performing tax preparation related work and therefore required similar hardware specifications with their laptops. So I'm just kind of proactively explaining there that, you know, it's 4 people, right? And they're all basically doing the same thing, and therefore their specifications were very similar. Okay. Yeah, I feel like this project is so simple that this stuff is like kind of unnecessary, but we're just gonna do it anyway. Let's make it quick. So the goals of the goals and rationale is to provide the customer with a scalable solution that allows the new employees to perform their work with stable infrastructure. Since there are no internal IT resources, the solution leverages cloud computing for the majority of applications needed. GoHex is the sole decision maker for this project. And this is also about, you know, identifying the stakeholders. So that was basically the goal, right? To create a stable place that the employees can do their work with stable infrastructure. There's not a lot of IT resources, so the solution leverages cloud computing. For some, you know, I could say a simple solution. Okay, so this is like super redundant, but you know, in a larger project, if you had some of the goals and objectives, it would be like 10 pages long, but this is very simple. So the project purpose is implement a brand new greenfield. Ooh, I forgot this buzzword. So greenfield is when it's basically a brand new system. Brownfield is if you're upgrading an existing system or adding to an existing system. Brand new greenfield build out of the network and infrastructure for Bill's tax haven. System goals. Let's see. So we don't really have too many operational problems or anything. Bills, tax haven. Was running into a capacity issue considering it was a home-based business and needed to expand into a commercial space. New employees were hired and all new IT yeah, it's actually kind of acting weird with the not responding thing, but I'll have to fix that later. The employees were hired and all new IT functions had to be built out. Okay, so so this is more talking about like the boundaries of the proposed system, right? The proposed system will allow bills, tax haven, provide a rich set of features such as exchange email, OneDrive storage, Ring Central, VoIP, phone/fax, etc. with minimal ongoing maintenance. There will be limits on desktop policy management because we did not implement Active Directory. All laptops and desktops are part of a local work group with only local policy in place. In order to keep the solution as simple as possible and within budget, we chose to omit the domain setup internally because it wasn't necessary considering the small scale of this project. In the future, if significant growth occurs with number of users, we will need to reassess the infrastructure. Okay. So we're basically saying that we did it in a simple way, but in the future, you know, if they do grow, we'll have to definitely reassess where we're at. Get rid of that too. Okay, business processes supported. You know, this is totally unnecessary. I feel like the business processes. I guess. So the business processes will be the primary business processes are tax preparation for customers, business email, QuickBooks, tax and accounting, ongoing work. I think that's about it. That's really all he's doing, right? Is the rest of this is all like background, like as far as like phones, you just need phones. Printing, you need printing. Internet, you need that. Obviously, you need a domain to have a website. You need Office products to write documents. But really, all they're doing is this part right here. They're using QuickBooks. They're using ADP. They're using the CERT. So that's really all our business processes are. High-level functional requirements. Yeah, I think we already have this, so I'm just gonna get rid of this. There's not enough details to justify another set of requirements there because we already have the operational requirements, which is really all this whole project is. So I'm just gonna quick go through this again. Oh, the introduction. Forgot that part. Okay, so notice here when we first were typing, it's using the font that was up here, which is italics. But if you were ever to, you know, accidentally, you know, go to a new section, for example, and it was typing in the wrong font, I'm just going to do this for an example. So you were typing here like, oh man, I want it to be this other font. Of course you could, you know, go to a section and say I want this to be highlighted and say I want it to be Arial without underline. And I don't want the font to be blue, I want it to be black. So this is how you change the font, is up here. The font color. And this is how you change the font look and the font size. So I'm sure you know this from all the other training you've had through Accenture and Lynda, but I just want to cover that just in case. Let's see. Introduction is going to show the purpose. Relevant documents. Okay. So I'm going to say the project to build the infrastructure for Bill's Tax Haven is based on several discovery meetings and data gathering questions. The initial technical options and products were put together in a proposal that was signed on, I'm going to just say 3/13/18, which is what has led us to move forward, put together the high-level design statement of work and project plan to finalize this project and move forward. I think that's probably fine for introduction. I mean, it's such a small project, but like I said, I have put together like much larger documents that are hundreds of pages long, depending on, if it was, let's say, a build out of 4 data centers that each had thousands of servers, and each server had hundreds of applications on them, and all kinds of interdependencies and whatnot. But I mean, once you understand the main sections in a diagram, in a document, you can just, fill out more sections and add more tables and more diagrams and whatnot. But this is the gist of it. I mean, this is the concept of it, is just, you just kind of go through sections and you organize your thoughts and you put all the information so that a customer can read this document and understand exactly why you did what you did. You got at least a few diagrams in there so they can visually see it too. Yeah, I think that pretty much captures everything. One thing we got to do is update the header and footer. So we're going to do HLD version 1.0, and we're going to say the customer is not customer XX, but Bill's Tax Haven. And if you close the header and footer, you can see that it's going to automatically change the header and footer, because that same header and footer was applied to all pages. So we should be good. I'm just going to scroll through. Oh, I'm also going to update this font right here, because that won't be italicized and it won't be the blue color, it'll be black. Because the blue color was basically when it was boilerplate or template, so we want to not have inconsistencies of different fonts and colors and things like that. Okay, I'm looking for any spelling errors or anything. I don't see any, so it should be good. I'm going to update my table of contents. I'm going to right click and do update field. Notice how it got rid of some of those extra sections. And I'm going to update it again and hit entire table. So this should be good to go at this point. So I should be able to actually print this out. I'm going to make sure I save this. So I'm going to save this not in the templates, but I'm going to just now rename this. Instead of calling it template high-level design, I'm just going to call it Bill's Tax Haven, because now this is the actual document. It's not a template anymore. That's version 1.0. Okay. Close out of that. I'm going to close out of that. Close out of that. Oh, you know, I actually noticed I didn't have the name tax haven in here. I don't like inconsistencies, so you want to have all your documents as consistent as possible. Like even using a dash versus not. If I'm going to use a dash here, I'm going to use one here also, and here. Okay, so I have my high-level design. Now I need to create my statement of work and project plan. So I'm going to copy my statement of work. I'm going to paste it in here. Whoops. Paste it in here. I can actually just rename this too. That's another way to do it. So I'm going to rename it to Bills Tax Haven dash SOW underscore version 1.0. Okay. So let's take a look and see what's in a statement of work document. So you've got your client, you've got your, so client is the customer, provider is, you know, the company doing the work, which would be artisan. You've got the date, the author, your project name, the client, the product of whatever you're doing, a description of what you're doing. You've got the different deliverables. So notice like this has this word deliverable in it, which are basically like the things you're actually responsible for doing. So if you think of in everyday terms, deliverables would be if someone was to say, hey, I'm going to plan your party for you, right? A friend of yours, let's say that was a project. Well, if it's your birthday party and you've got, you know, 100 people you want to invite, or let's say 10 people you want to invite, that person, one of the deliverables would be to create the guest list, right? One of the deliverables would be to send out the invites. One of the deliverables would be to order the birthday cake or order the food or get the DJ to have the right playlist or whatever these different steps you're going to take to organize that project of your birthday. So if you were to think of it that way, I mean, an IT project is no different than any other type of project you do every day in your life. It's you organize these items you need to do. You're just not actually getting like sign off from a customer and things like that in your everyday life, but you know, the rest of it is very similar. So it's really not that different when you think about it that way. So we're going to put in all these different deliverables that we're going to do to get this project done. And then this is like the cost, which we had some of this in our estimate, our proposal. So we'll have to put that again in here because if something's changed, this is a place where we can kind of update it. This is more like the terms. So this is like, you know, when are they going to pay us? This is kind of how long it's good for. And then finally signature, right? So let's go ahead and update this. So the client, the name is Bill Hicks. This is just bogus data, so Bill at Bill's Tax Haven. Well, actually, he didn't have the company email yet, so he's using his Gmail. It doesn't really matter, but I'm going to go ahead and just copy this for consistency from our other document that you made for him in here. So again, if you paste, you can make sure you only take the actual data and not the formatting. So that's one of the beauties of right clicking. You can pick what it's going to look like. Instead of, if you just paste, it might actually copy over the formatting from wherever you had it, where you copied it from. Let's see, let's go back to here. All the phone number is 222-3333. Also, this is an interesting thing in Excel. If you want to add an extra line, so in a cell, when you start typing, right, when you double click, you start typing, it assumes there's only one line. If you hit enter, it'll actually move you to the next cell. Word, on the other hand, if you hit enter, it'll move you to a new line, right? So if you want to move to a new cell, or sorry, a new line, you have to double click, but then hit control enter. Sorry, alt enter. And then it'll move you to a new line within that cell. And now I can do control V. So Hickville, Minnesota, there we go. Okay. And then the provider. So under the client, I'm actually going to hit Alt Enter and put bills, tax, haven. Provider is Artisan Consulting. Name is trainee01. Phone number 612-111-1111. Trainee01 at artisanconsulting.com. I'm just making this stuff up, obviously. And then we'll just use our address here, 550 Vandalia Street, Suite 302. Again, you gotta hit Alt Enter. St. Paul, Minnesota 55114. Date is 3/14/18. Author trainee 01. Project name Bills Tax Haven. Oops. Build out. Bill Hicks. Product infrastructure build out. So infrastructure, by the way, isn't necessarily an IT thing. So if you're looking at it from a city perspective, infrastructure would be like your roads or your bridges, right? So those are the things that you kind of, or your electrical system, your electrical grid. That would be the infrastructure for your city that you kind of, need to function, right? I mean, you take it for granted almost that your infrastructure is always going to be there. Same thing for a company and its infrastructure from an IT standpoint. I mean, like having internet service is something that you just take for granted that you need, right? To do your job. Having a phone system, having access to a file server like OneDrive to store your files, having access to a printer, those are all parts of your infrastructure that every company needs. Okay, so the project description is going to be Bills Tax Haven is moving from a home-based business to a new commercial address. Along with that, they are hiring 3 new employees. New infrastructure. Applications, desktop, laptops, and and printing was required in this implementation. Okay, so as far as the deliverable date and the deliverable description, so this would be like if you were working on that birthday thing, like the item you would do and when it would be due. So like, creating the guest list due tomorrow, sending the guest list due the next day, ordering the food the day after, or maybe some of these are on the same day, right, when they're due. It just depends on how long you think it'll take you to do those items. And then these are all the actual items and the cost for them and the terms. So I'm going to say it's net 30 for all these terms. So that means that from the time they get the invoice, how long it takes for them to have to pay it. So I'm going to copy cells. If you click a cell and if you were to go down to here and wait for this arrow to come, you can right click and drag. And if you let go, you can copy the cell, which will just copy everything. But let's say for some reason you want it to be a numbering scheme, so like you wanted to start at 2, you can actually do the same thing, like copy or highlight that, go to the bottom right where you get the arrow or the X right there, and then if you right click and you do fill series, it'll automatically number things. So that fill down is actually pretty nice, but I actually want to have net 30. So I'm just going to come to here, right click and drag and do copy cells. So basically everything that we ever invoice, bill, we're going to say is net 30. Duration of services, I'm going to say 30 days. Terms of payment, net 30 from receipt of invoice. So whenever we send them the invoice, they had 30 days to pay. I'm going to fill this part out too. So the client is Bill Hicks, because you can actually not have to manually write this part in the printout. You can actually print this part and even the date, because the only part that you legally need a signature, or sorry, an actual written signature, is the actual signature part. Anything else, as far as a name or a date, you don't have to actually manually sign. You can actually write if within your PDF or your Word document or Excel document. Printed name for the provider is going to be trainee 01, date 3/14/18, and then we have to have our signatures, of course. So now the only thing that remains is the deliverables, which we don't have to reinvent the wheel here, right? Because we already put together a proposal, so we can copy from this proposal that we had here. I'm also going to save this again. You want to get used to saving things on a regular basis in case your computer has an issue or whatnot. Here we go, the service quote. So I'm just going to copy these items. I'm going to use them as a guideline for my deliverables. So I've got 4 lines for deliverables. How many items do I have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to add a few more lines. And you can do that by just, if you click here, so if you click all the way on the left, it actually highlights the entire line. So you can just right click here and do insert, and it will just automatically keep the same formatting. So I'm just going to insert a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm just going to add 2 more. 7, 8. That's because I had 7 lines of information. So I always like to have 1 extra line just for formatting purposes. So I'm going to come in here for deliverable description, and I'm going to paste to match the destination formatting. Okay, so I didn't like that. So this is actually kind of annoying where if you copy a bunch of stuff from a Word document and try to paste it into Excel, because it doesn't see that it matches up with the cells, because like these are just, you know, totally different formatting on the Word side, right? So I'm gonna try a little trick here. I'm gonna open up, this is something I do when I run into this situation, is I'll paste it into Notepad, and sometimes Notepad will remove all the formatting, so it'll just be like basic lines. And then if I come back in here, it might work. Well, it didn't, but it was worth a shot. Okay. So you can double click on here and paste, and then you have to sometimes kind of painstakingly put each item separately. So you have to like highlight in here, Control X, and I'll start pasting at the bottom. So you have to double click, whoops. Paste. Go back up here. If you double click, you can highlight, Control X, go into here, double click, paste. So it's not too bad once you get used to it. It's pretty fast. Okay, so there's some weird quirks with Excel. So like these two cells were actually two different cells, but they've been merged, right? So for some reason, like this line has been merged. So notice like it's just one box, but this line is like two different boxes. So it's thinking this is like one little cell right here. So I need to actually merge this. So if you highlight both of these cells right here, and if you right click and you do format cells, I can go to alignment and merge. So notice how it now is just one. And this is actually what's nice about the format painter. So now that I notice there's like that same problem on a bunch of stuff, I can just click here, hit format painter, and then I can just highlight all of them and it'll just automatically format it. So it saves you some time. And I'm just going to continue doing this real quick. So remember, you have to double click in the cell to start editing. Excel is a little bit more picky, I'd say, than Word. You have to kind of learn some weird nuances like this with, you know, how it just functions. Okay. So, I mean, this wasn't exactly what my deliverables were, but it was like this doesn't tell me the exact steps that I need to take, but it does give me the things that we bought. So, the things that we bought are also a good indicator of the steps that we need to take, right? Because obviously, like, these are good indicators, like, well, you know, if I bought a Jet Direct card, that means that I need to put it in the printer, right? So, deliverables are going to be, so high level wise, we're going to need to provision Comcast internet. Provisioning is just like a fancy way of saying calling them up and ordering the circuit. Procurement of 4 times Dell laptops. So that was this part right here. Procurement of Dell desktop. That was that one. Installation of network printer and Jet Direct card. implementation of UPS for desktop. So that was that. Procurement and setup of QuickBooks. You want to itemize things because you don't want to lump in like QuickBooks and Lacert and whatever else, you know, in one line. Because what if QuickBooks takes, you know, 2 days and the other thing takes 5 days? You don't want to put them together. You want the customer to see independently how long each thing takes. Let's see. QuickBooks. I'm going to say procurement and setup. And when I'm saying setup here, it doesn't mean that we're actually going to like go in and do all the accounting work for this company. It's just saying that we're going to just make sure that they can access the software, right? We're not going to actually go set up all of the records in QuickBooks. We're just going to make sure that from a technology standpoint, that they can get access to QuickBooks and that they can go in and start updating it themselves. So that's a very distinct difference. Like, we're not going in and updating software for them. We're just making sure it's installed and accessible by them. Okay, so we've got the internet. We've got, I'm going to say provision, Comcast internet. I'm going to add another line for. So notice how it did the weird formatting thing again. So I'm going to go ahead and use the format painter and highlight that. I'm going to say customize Comcast router. Because there are some things you want to do, like securing the router and putting on there's a firewall feature you can enable, things like that. Just little extras to make sure that they're more secure. We also need to add all of the items for Office 365 and also Ring Central, which is the phone system. So I'm going to I'm going to copy the format for all of this. So I'm going to say Office 365 procurement is one item. Because you have to order this stuff, but then also Office 365 setup as a different item. Format painter. So I'm just kind of lumping in Office 365 for everything as far as OneDrive and email, so the Exchange and the storage part. Because it really doesn't take that long, or it doesn't take that much time to do each of those sections. Let's see, so what else do we need to do? We need to do the procurement of Ring Central, VoIP solution. Then we also have configuration of, just because you get the VoIP Central doesn't mean like, you know, that covers actually setting up the phones, putting the phone numbers on them, whatever directory numbers you want. It doesn't set up like the voicemail. It's not like the fax setup, all that stuff. So there's a lot of additional work you have to do to actually configure it. Ring Central. We should actually say VoIP and fax. Let's see. Internet, the router, the desktops, the laptop, the printing, the UPS, QuickBooks, Lacert, ADP. There really isn't a whole lot to set up. I'm not even going to list it because It's just you go to a website and you set it up. So as long as we have internet for the customer, they can do that themselves. I can't think of anything else that they would need as far as a deliverable. Let's go back to our list of I actually meant this right here. Okay, so oh, you know what we forgot is the domain part right here. So let's make sure we don't do that. So domain registration and setup. I'm going to say Wix hosting and web development. What else? Domain, website, you got the phone system, already covered this. Oh, that's one interesting thing about Excel is if you do Control X, it will actually cut, like you know in Word, if you just cut and paste, it doesn't like remove a lot of formatting. Well, with Excel, if you actually cut a lot of things, it'll like get rid of the entire formatting. So you have to be careful when you do that. So you can always just paste the format back in. Let's see. So we've got the website hosting, website development, setting up the domain. You got setting up the phone system, Office 365. Then there's the actual staging and install for the 4x laptops. Because you want to like break this out, right? Because ordering the laptops takes time, but then like staging and installing them takes time too, because you have to, you know, put in the hardware, you have to install the operating system, you have to install drivers on them, then you have to install Microsoft Office on them, you have to put Chrome on it, you have to customize some browser settings, you have to make sure they have access to all of the applications they want. You might have to put things like bookmarks in their browser so everything's nice and set up. You have to add the printer to each of these laptops. So each of those things, you know, takes a little bit of time. So it takes hours actually per laptop to actually stage it. Which is how we came up with that estimate of 88 hours, as we kind of broke down the number of hours it took for everything, right? Just to kind of refresh your mind, this hours estimate. Yeah, like, you know, we thought it would take 20 hours to set up Office 365, 20 hours to do the website, 2 hours to register the domain. So, you know, it depends on, sometimes if your hours estimates are completely off, then that actually kind of sucks because the customer thinks it's going to cost them this much, you know, in hourly, but then now if you're way over, they may refuse to pay and things like that. So that's kind of a whole different topic as far as being accurate with your estimates. So generally you should probably take whatever you think and double it, because that way you should be safer. So we have to also do staging for Dell desktop. Okay, so I think for this little network, that should be everything. You're procuring the laptops, procuring the desktop, setting up printing, setting up the UPS on the desktop, setting up QuickBooks, setting up Lacert, setting up procuring and setting up Office 365, setting up and procuring the phone system and fax, the domain and website, and then finally building the laptops and desktops. So I think that should do it. So generally, you want to start with the things that you have least control over. So you want to start with the internet procurement, because that's something that usually takes about 30 days. So to actually order it, we can say we can start as early as, let's give them 2 weeks. So we'll start on the 2nd of April. So I'm going to say for 2. And then, so I'm going to add 30 days. So I'm going to just say 5/2 for being able to customize the router, because it's going to take 30 days for them to get that. As far as, I'm going to say, I'm going to start procuring the desktops and laptops. I'm just going to actually procure Jet Direct and UPS. I'm just going to add this in one line because I can procure those all in one shot. So I'm going to say that I'm going to start that also on the 3rd. But obviously I can't install it until I receive it, right? So I'm going to receive it in 2 weeks. I'm going to just add 14 days to that. So 4/17, 18. I'm going to do the same thing for the desktop, assuming I can get the desktop in 2 weeks, which I should be able to. Sites like Dell are generally pretty fast. Like, you can order something and have it within a week. Especially with the volume of only 4 laptops. If we had to order 100 laptops, that might take much longer. QuickBooks, again, the procurement is pretty fast, so I'm going to start the procurement process on the 18th. Same thing here. Office 365 is actually really fast too, because you don't have to wait around for a salesperson. It's all through the web. So you can basically procure it and set it up the same day if you want. But because I've got a bunch of other procurement and, configuration and research stuff I need to do here, I'm going to give myself a little bit of time. So I'm going to say, I'm going to start on the 6th. And then I'm going to go on the 9th to begin some of the setup. Give myself a little bit of time. Because you don't want to try and procure and configure everything at the same time, because you only have so much time in the day, so you kind of have to spread out your deliverable dates. So I'm going to start doing, I'm going to assume it takes me about a couple of days to do the Office thing. So I'm going to procure Ring Central over a couple of days, and then I'm going to assume it takes me a couple of days to actually configure it to, actually it's 4/12, whoops. You don't want to usually list weekend days in here, because the customer is going to think that you're going to bill them overtime. So the only time you work weekends is if the customer is willing to pay overtime and pay for those extra hours and costs, which they usually aren't. So I'm going to say that you're done with the provisioning and configuration of Ring Central by the, I'm going to say, let's see if it's the 12th. I'm going to say the 17th. The domain is usually pretty quick, so I'm going to say for 318. I'm going to give myself a month for the website because it's not critical, so I'm going to say 5318 because he didn't really care about the website to begin with, so if it takes a month, he's probably not going to care too much about that. Again, it's totally different if the customer had a pressing item to do the website. So if they want it done in 2 weeks, you might have to push back some of these other things. So this is where you have to think through, like if they want that and it takes all my time, I got to make sure I push back these other things so that they have to pick your priority. The customer kind of has to help you dictate whatever is your priority and also your manager. Staging, I'm gonna say that the laptops are gonna take let's just say a whole week. So if you started the procurement of the laptops on the 3rd, let's say that they arrive in 2 weeks to be safe. So I'll say I'll start 418. And let's see. I'll say I'll be done on the 25th. Oh, actually, I meant to do 425 for both of these. Because this is when I'm actually going to be done, not when I'm going to start. So I think that's everything. Yep, it's the router, the desktop, the laptops, the printing, the UPS, the software, Office 365, the phone system, the domain, the website, and then finally, staging these, which staging means like everything from hardware and also installing all the software on each of these. QuickBooks I kind of put as a separate thing because this is more to get the desktop functional from a basic OS and app standpoint. This is more of a custom step, so I'm adding, procurement here as a separate thing. Yeah, that should be good. So I should be able to copy these again as far as this is kind of redundant, but on the SOW you'll have the cost in here because sometimes the customer wants to know if like things have changed and whatnot too from the first time they got the proposal. So I'm going to add a few lines in here. Whoops. So notice that it's got that, because I highlighted this line, it's going to, when I do insert, it's going to add this down here. So if you don't want that, you can go down to this line and do insert. And then the formatting's already the way you want, right? So if you did do it up here, of course, you could just highlight this and do format paint and go like that. So it's pretty easy either way. Okay, I've got 7 lines and I've got 1, 2, 3, 6 items, so that should be good. Of course, the items aren't going to paste properly, just like last time. Oh, they did this time. Weird. Okay, so I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to right-click and say paste special, and say match destination formatting. The source formatting would keep the formatting from where I copied it. Destination is going to copy what's here, which is way better. So I'm going to have to expand this. So there we go. Now when you expand stuff like that, the one thing you want to look out for is if this will print right. So I'm going to do file print. So notice how this is like all wacky now. The the document has gone onto multiple pages because it, and you can also see it here with this line. So I'm going to change the layout to be narrow. Oh, it already is. So I need to actually not do that. So I'm going to move this back over here. Let's change the margins back to narrow. Why is it doing that? That's weird. You know, you could also just Control Z. That's another easy way to do it. Because right now I did Control Z and now my print layout is correct again, right? So this is really a 3-page document. Yeah. So you can see the line right here. So this is where the page ends. So you want to make sure that your document isn't accidentally going over to the next page and throw off the number of pages you have. So you can also just go like this, highlight this whole section. If you double click right here, it's going to automatically space it out, right? So we can just do this. I'm going to copy these items right here. So if I right click, I can also do that. And it's going to add all this up, right? So is the item, so the dollar amount should be the same, 18,235. But here it's not that. Oh, you don't, so this is an example where the equal sum is not starting where it should. So I want to update it to include cells. There we go. 18,236. It's actually rounding up instead of this exact number, so we need to update that. So if you do format cells, number, you want to have 2 decimal places. So now the number matches exactly what was on the original quote, because you don't want the statement of work and the quote to be different. So you want it to be the same so that you're showing that your numbers have, you know, not changed from the original quote. And also, Excel does autofill stuff. So like, you know, notice if I just type N, it automatically types net 30 in, so that can save some time. Notice also that here, even though I've got like 163.82, it's automatically rounding up here because the formatting of these cells is set up to round up. So I can highlight all of these, right click and do format cells, and change the decimal places to 2, and notice how it did updated all of them at once, right? So now it matches exactly what's on the original quote. So I've got all my information right here. I've got my description, I've got my deliverables, I've got my investment, I've got my duration, I've got my terms. All I'm missing is a signature, so I'm going to save this. I'm just going to do a check to make sure the printing looks right, which it does. Okay, so that's done. So I'm going to close that out, close that out, close that out. Okay, so I've got my SOW and I've got my high-level design. What else do I need? I need my project plan. So I'm going to copy that now. I'm going to rename it to Bills Tax Haven Project Plan. Of course, I got to do the numbering, right, or my version control, version 1.0. So I also don't like that this is kind of becoming a mess, so I'm going to organize this a little bit more. I'm going to create a subfolder. Which of course it's sitting here, but okay. So right click, do new folder. And I'm just going to call it customer deliverables. So this way I can actually keep track of what things I actually sent to the customer and which things were kind of for my own knowledge. So this was the signed documents. This was the original service quote that I sent. And here we have the SOW, the project plan, the monthly cost which we sent, and the HLD. So I'm going to cut all of that, put it into customer deliverables. Okay, so now I've just got these other documents that are more like supporting documents. So I'm going to clean that up too. I'm just going to put it into supporting documents. Which, by the way, when you see this like weird squiggly line stuff, that probably means that there's a document that's in use. So if you look at the costs visual, that's because this is open. So if you try to move that document while this is open, it'll probably complain. So if I try to do it, if I do copy or cut and try to move it in here, yeah, see, it'll say can't be completed because the file is open, so I'm gonna have to cancel that. So it's just a good sign when you, or it's not a good sign, but it's a sign that you have something open when you have this type of symbol right here. So you can just go ahead and close that. And notice how that went away. That's called a temp file. So the temp file went away. So now we can basically copy, and you can hit, by the way, if you highlight a bunch of stuff and you want to undo one of them, you can just hit Control and then click the one you don't want. And then you can right click and cut and paste into supporting documents. So now this is much cleaner. And I'm going to rename this to customer deliverables. Okay. So I did this already. I did the SOW, so I just need the project plan. So the cool thing is actually we can copy a lot of this part from the SOW because we have all the steps in there. So I'm just gonna name this Bills Tax Haven Project Plan. And I'm just gonna say Gantt chart for Bills Tax Haven. So a Gantt chart is basically just like a project plan or just a visual that shows you what items are due and like how they all relate, so you can see it visually on a timeline. Like this is happening from here to here, this is happening from here to here. So you can see which things are overlapping and which things are dependent on each other. Like you need to finish this before you can start this, but then like this item is happening at the same time as this item, or this item is happening at the same time as this and this. So it's to help project manage things, so you can visually see how things are like interdependent on each other. So these were just kind of like sample information. So this is a template, so we need to put in the real information in here. So let's open up the SOW. So these are all really things that should be in there, right? Because these are all the steps we're going to take. So before I paste it in, I just want to make sure I have the right number. So I have 13 items, which you can see right here. If you highlight something, if you click something like that, like the first cell, you hold shift and you just hit the down arrow, it'll automatically count how many cells that was. So it's 13, right? So I've got 13 cells here, and I need to have, if you go back to the SOW, we've got, oops. It was 14. When you go over to a new page, it actually stops counting for some reason. It's kind of weird that way, but, or sorry, it's 16. 17 items, so I want to update this to have 17. So I'm going to insert a few things. Okay, so that should be 17 now. And of course I went one extra because it's always safer to have one extra. Close out of that. Okay, so now that I've got all these highlighted, I can right click and copy. And I can paste them in the task name. I'm going to right click again. I'm going to do paste with keeping the format from what's here, right? Then this would just do values, that's formulas, transpose is not right. So you can totally see what it's going to look like before you actually click it. So this is the one I want right here. So I'm going to double click here. So if you highlight the whole thing and then you double click right here, it should automatically, well, it should anyway. I don't know why it's not doing that, but normally if you highlight something and you double click in the crosshairs, it'll like auto expand it, but looks like we have to manually expand this part. Not a big deal. Sometimes there's like nuances of how, oh no, look at this. It actually went into the start date field, which totally screws up the formula. Okay, I'm gonna undo this part. So if you do Control Z, now we're back to where we were, right? So I don't know why I did that. So another thing you can do is you can put something into Notepad, and then you can get rid of extra spacing and whatnot. So you see how there's all this extra spacing right here. So I'm going to highlight this part right here, copy. I'll do Control H, just paste that, which is all the spaces, and replace it with nothing, and do replace all. And that's going to clean up my file because now I don't have all those extra spaces, right? So I'm going to copy that. Let's see if that works better. So I'm going to try that again. Oh, that's so annoying. Okay. Well, I'm just going to paste it into the one cell and just move them one by one. So there's got to be a better way than that, but that's kind of annoying. So I'm going to add an extra row in here and then do it. Yeah, that should work. I'm going to add a row to account for the formatting issue, so. Okay. Paste special text. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I was actually just being silly there. So I didn't actually need to add that extra column. So I can just go into here, right click and paste, and then if I just go to this crosshair, it just automatically expands it. So so that's got these tasks in there now. So notice like it automatically pulled all of those tasks up to here. So now I just need to update the start and end date for all those, and it's automatically going to create my Gantt chart for me. So let's just make sure this copied everything. Yeah, it looked like it did. Cool. So it's got all my steps listed out. So now as I update my start and end date, it'll just automatically do the duration also. So that's the beauty of formulas, right? You put in the start date, you put in the end date, it does a formula to figure out how many days it took. So I should be able to copy that from here also. So I'm going to paste this in Notepad and just make sure it's clean. Yep. And now I'm going to paste it in here. So this is the start date. So I only had the start date, so I'm going to put the end date now. So I'm going to say, like, you know, this takes 30 days, right? So I'm going to say 5/1/18. Because to order a circuit, it somehow didn't have the formatting, so I'm going to take that and go like that. So, and that's another cool thing about Excel is you can, like, notice how this field didn't have the formula, but if you have the formula down here, Excel is smart enough, you go and if you copy Control C and go up here and do Control V, it's automatically going to move the formula up. So it saw that between here and here is 29 days. So here I'm going to customize the router, and that was about a 2-day effort. So I'm going to say it's 5/3/18 is, so that's, sorry, a 1-day effort. Procurement of the laptops we thought was going to take about 2 weeks, so I did 4/17/18. So 14 days. Same thing here. We thought this was about about a 1 day thing, so 418. Or sorry, the procurement was going to take, procurement is ordering it basically, so I'm going to say 410 just to give it a whole week. So here we're going to start on the 17th just to give it extra wiggle room. So we're going to say that's going to take the installation in 2 days. So I'll say 19. Same thing, 2 days. So you can procure the QuickBooks software right away because it is all online based. So I'm going to say it's going to take me a week. So I'm going to say 4/8/18. Same thing here. So procurement, I'm just going to give myself 2 days for that as far as like going through and clicking all the settings. The setup, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks. So that would be 14 days, so 23/18. The procurement, I'm going to give myself 2 days. Configuration, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks. I'm going to add 14 days to that, so 4/31/18. So notice the formula wasn't here, so I'm going to copy and paste that. I think I had an invalid date is why that didn't work. Because I don't think there is 31 days in that month. So, so domain registration, we should probably move this up because it's closer in timeline to the provisioning. Oops. Cut and paste. Insert cut cells. So we're going to say that's going to take just 1 day. So again, it didn't copy the formula, so I'm going to copy and paste that. If I start the Wix hosting here, it's only going to take me a month, so I'm going to say 6/3/18. Because that was a low priority thing. So the staging, if I start here, I'm going to give myself a week. So I'm going to say 5/1/18. Same thing here. So there we go. I'm just going to format this to be in one font also. So okay. So this basically shows you, I don't know why it's bunching everything right here. That's kind of weird. It thinks it's starting on this January of 2015, though. That's weird. Huh. I'll have to look at that part because it shouldn't be doing that. There's probably something wrong with this formula, but you get the point of this whole exercise, right? It's to use existing templates for Gantt charts. Like there's a lot of complexity here as far as like these formulas that it's using to automatically build the picture of what's going on based on the start and end date of the deliverable, which is not working, but it's really not that important. I'll fix this later, but you will most likely not have to ever fix the formula. You will just be working with the formula and just putting the data in. Because this is something that a project manager would do, but it's important to know that these types of things are there, and you'll see these project plans and whatnot. You might have to update them every now and then. So more from a project person, not necessarily a help desk person. So just keep that in mind. So I'm just going to save this for now. It's not that big of a deal. I'll figure that out later. So at this point, we've basically done all of our deliverables. And really, most of that was to expose you to how to mess around with these different Excel and Word documents and get a lot of experience with that, because it's a huge asset to be able to produce good documents, whether you're in help desk or operations or analyst roles. Most engineers or analysts or help desk people are actually pretty bad at documentation. Most IT people, for whatever reason, don't like to do documentation. So this is a guaranteed way where you can kind of make yourself stand out from everyone else. So that is essentially everything we needed to do to send everything to our manager at this point for review, right? So we're gonna, at this point, stop this video because we've created all the deliverables. The next video will take us through the process of actually emailing these videos off to the customer, these deliverables to the customer, and have them review them. Before that, we'll actually have the manager also peer review them just to make sure, give a second set of eyes and make sure that all these documents look good. And then assuming that TED trainee or manager likes these documents, he might redline them or give you a few updates. Then after that, you're going to send it off to the customer bill for final sign off. So hopefully this was a lot of experience as far as working with this documentation, and now you're understanding kind of the project life cycle. Again, if you have any questions, make sure to ask your trainee. And thanks a lot for your time. We'll talk soon.